Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network and presented in partnership with TrekCore.com. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on August 11th, 2023, and is current through the Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2 finale, Hegemony, so beware of spoilers. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a regular news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in the Alex Kurtzman era of Star Trek with the 12th television show and the 14th movie currently in production, and merchandise continuing to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone. And my guest this week is returning guest Chris Vanderkamp. Chris, welcome back to WeeklyTrek.
Alex, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here for this one.
Yeah, it's a big episode. So, all right, Chris, you know the drill. I want to know something's got you excited about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
Oh, man. I think I'm still at Warp 1, recovering from the season finale, but I am very excited about the upcoming Lower Decks. Season 4 looks great, and I'm excited to see where they go. And it looks like there might even be some references to the crossover episode from what we saw in the trailers. So Lower Decks has never been my thing. It's just a type of comedy that I don't normally enjoy, but I actually find myself kind of interested in it for this season. And maybe that has something to do with the fact that now we're not really sure when the next live Trek is coming.
Yeah.
So, maybe it's a bit of I'll take what I can get.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, I'm excited for Lower Decks coming up. It's, it's fun, right? In the sense that Star Trek will have served us three quite different vibes so far this year. Started off with Picard season 3, which obviously, was its own thing. And then Strange New Worlds season 2, which, yes, live action, just the same as Picard season 3. But, you hold those 20 episodes next to each other and you're not going, oh, well, this is more of the same, right? Like Strange New Worlds is its whole separate own thing from Picard, and Lower Decks is its own separate whole thing from either of those two. And so, we get 30 weeks of Star Trek this year. That might be the last time that happens for a year, 18 months or something like that, given the strikes are still ongoing and production on live action Star Trek is not moving forward. But it's fun and it gives us, something to look forward to. And I think, I talked about this in a previous episode. I think there are some surprises in store for Lower Decks season 4, the way they've talked about, a few of these episodes. So yeah, I'm now that Strange New Worlds, just as when Picard season 3 ended, it was like, all right, now I can, sort of pivot to get excited about Strange New Worlds. Now that Strange New Worlds is over, I can pivot to getting excited about Lower Decks. All right, let me tell you what I'm feeling good about this week, which is, well, the last episode, I was feeling good about the fact that I was going to STLV. And so this week, I'm feeling good about the fact that I was just at STLV. The 57-year mission tour, Creation Entertainment's big Star Trek convention that takes place every year, used to be the official Star Trek convention. After the aborted experiment of the Star Trek missions run by Reed Pop, STLV is no longer the official Star Trek convention, but it's still the sort of same experience with many of the same stars. Doesn't have the word Star Trek anywhere. This year, there wasn't even a lot of talk about actual Star Trek because of the strikes, but it was a wonderful experience. Every year they've done it since 2011. That included 2021, right after everybody got vaccinated, but the Delta variant of COVID was really starting to spike. And then last year when they temporarily moved out of the Rio to Bally's on the Strip in Las Vegas. And this year was the first year that really felt like things were more or less back to normal after the pandemic. It had a very, in terms of how busy it was, how many people there were, the sort of energy around the convention felt to me much more similar to 2019, the last year it was the official Star Trek convention, than to 2021 or 2022. 2021, obviously very affected by the still ongoing pandemic, and 2022, they've moved to a new venue that was not really the kind of right venue for the convention. So back at the Rio this year, the Rio itself, let's just say they are about to start a big renovation of that hotel. And yes, it's a dump, and yes, it's our dump, but boy, does it really need that renovation now. It felt so much worse this year than it was even when I was there 2 years ago. And I'm extremely forgiving of the Rio's particular eccentricities. But it was a wonderful weekend. It was a wonderful weekend to see friends, to spend time with people, just to enjoy all of the experiences that STLV had to offer. It's always one of the highlights of my year. I think this year probably is the highlight of my year. Extremely memorable experience. And I had a really, really terrific time. So I already booked my hotel for next year. So I'm going to be back STLV, the 58-year mission convention, and still at the Rio, and hopefully a probably not dramatically renovated Rio, but a somewhat renovated Rio that at least will be a little better than what we experienced this year. So that's what I'm feeling good about Star Trek this week.
I'm gonna go next year. I've made a promise to myself. I had intended to go in 2022. Work got in the way. This year wasn't gonna happen because I was in the middle of changing jobs, and so I've promised myself that I'm gonna go, which is an interesting promise to make to myself because I work part-time with the city of Minneapolis as an elections worker and as an elections trainer. And we have 3 elections next year between the presidential primary, the state primary, and the general. So I have already told my team that I'm going to be gone for a week right before the state primary. So I might be a little tired, but I am going to make it.
Very, very worth it. I think you'll have a great time. I always have a great time. I think everybody else who has the privilege to be able to attend always has a great time. So if you can make it, I think you'll enjoy it.
I'm looking forward to it. I love the whole thing about the Rio. It may be a dump, but it's our dump.
I mean, even more so this year in terms of it's not like there was anybody else there. It literally was all Star Trek fans for the whole weekend that we were there, especially the first couple of days. I've never seen it as sort of quiet at the Rio as it was the Tuesday, Wednesday. I was there. It got a bit more lively towards the weekend, but it's definitely the Rio was bought by a new company a couple of years ago and then leased back to Caesars Entertainment, the big Las Vegas company that owns Caesars and MGM and a couple of the other big casinos, who had previously owned it so that they could continue running it. And now it's like Caesars is finally moving fully out and this new company that owns it is moving fully in. And it's really obvious that in the last 2 years during that kind of changeover, nobody's had any incentive to put any money into it. Caesars has not had any incentive to put any money into it because they don't own the property anymore. They're just, sort of managing it on behalf of this new group. And this new group has been getting their plans in place to do this big renovation. So it's not like you want to get new furniture if you're then going to turn around and get even more new furniture once you finally have all of the plans in place for the renovation. So the renovation plans are finally in place. They'd actually, looks like they'd started in a few places. One of my friends, their corridor half of the corridor had new carpet and wall fixtures and things like that. They've shown pictures of what the renovated rooms will look like, and they do look a lot better than the rooms do right now because, boy, that furniture is it's at the point where if something breaks, they just take it out of the room. They don't replace it because you're just going to dump it all in the next couple of months anyway. So I'm really hoping next time we go. And the other thing too is that they'd had the Rio was one of the hotels that had a big buffet. Well, that closed. I can't remember if it closed because of the pandemic or it closed the year before the pandemic, but they're in the process of converting it into a food hall. That was not open. And so food options at the Rio were really limited. But once that does open, that actually, will bring a decent number of food places to the Rio that, will make things so much better next year. So I think it will be a much better experience next year, just in terms of being there. The convention itself is always awesome. But in terms of the sort of stuff that lives around it and as Star Trek fans, ownership of that hotel and casino for a few days, I think it will be better next year than it was this year.
Well, and let's also hope that the strikes have ended with fair deals for the writers and the actors so that we actually get to celebrate with all of the different cast and crew that make the journey to the convention, and we'll actually get to talk about what they love to do.
Yes, I did enjoy learning about all of the actors' favorite foods, but I think that was probably I enjoyed learning about that this year. Next year, it would be really nice to talk about Star Trek again. All right, well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
Well, Star Trek Strange New Worlds' second season just wrapped up with a classic Star Trek cliffhanger, complete with a difficult choice for Captain Pike, his crew in danger, and a pulsing soundtrack as the episode cuts to those 3 fateful words, "To be continued." Speaking to Vulture, Strange New Worlds showrunner Henry Alonso Myers talked a bit about the season finale, Hegemony, and the decision to make the episode a cliffhanger. The entire intent of doing this episode that way was that we were thinking about the great Next Generation two-parter, The Best of Both Worlds, Myers said. It's a fantastic end of the season, and it shocks the hell out of you. Like, I'll have to wait until next season to see the next part. That's all we were trying to do. It was just, let's surprise everyone and have this be a Best of Both Worlds. Let's hold ourselves up to that level. Myers also talked about the effort that has gone into getting the appearance and the story of the Gorn to where the show wanted to be. In the same way that we approached Nurse Chapel as a contemporary character, a character that would exist in the world of today, we wanted to approach the Gorn as they would have been done today, which is big, expensive, and complicated, Myers said. It took a long time to get it right. We designed them in season 1, but it's one of the reasons the Gorn episode fell near the end of the season, because we were doing design work for the whole season to work on it. We knew it would take 6 to 10 months. It just takes forever. And I want to credit our visual design folks at Legacy Effects because it's a lot of work and it takes a long, long time. And what of the surprise appearance of one Lieutenant Junior Grade Montgomery Scott? Myers said, quote, "We're trying to tell this story about this person who exists right now for the show. The goal with Scotty was exactly that. Let's create a role for a new person, a person who's younger, a person who's experiencing things for the first time. They don't know what their future is. They don't know who they're going to become. It's a very simple idea, but it's really important. So our Scotty is younger. He's not yet the person who he will come to be. We had the joy of finding an actual Scotsman to play him, Martin Quinn, which if I'm not mistaken is actually a first for the series, which I say out of love. I love all of the other Scotties out there." Chris, what was your reaction to the finale of Strange New Worlds?
Oh man, I've watched it 3 times and I'm still digesting. I think I may have broken glass when I saw Scotty. And I have to say, my hat and a lot of other things are off to whoever made that casting selection, because Martin Quinn is outstanding. I'm going to echo some other reviews that I've seen where they've said he's channeling both Simon Pegg and James Doohan.
Yeah.
And he's blending these performances and adding his own elements. He is this adorable little cinnamon roll and nothing bad can ever happen to him ever. Like I want to like take him away from this and feed him soup and put him in a hamster ball so that nothing hurts him because he's so adorable.
I really like Martin Quinn's performance. I think the thing that I like most about it is he has the physicality of James Doohan while also sort of like channeling the eccentricity of Simon Pegg's version of the character. And it's a really nice mix. I mean, the moment he appeared, just the way he sort of was holding his hand, you know, it was like, oh, who is this, you know, red shirt young person? Clearly, it's obviously Scotty. I mean, especially when he opens his mouth and a Scottish accent comes out, that was a real like fist pump, yeah, you know, start cheering moment. And I mean, for me, far and away, the best thing about the episode, I mean, a wonderful surprise they managed to keep that under wraps. That was, you know, that was not something like lots of people had guessed things like, well, it's called Hegemony, so the Gorn are going to be in it. And are they dropping hints that Captain Patel is probably, you know, about to shuffle off the mortal coil? And, you know, so there were sort of pieces like that about the finale that had been telegraphed going into it. But the involvement of Scotty and quite the sort of wonderful way that they introduced the character and the way that as that character, he sort of, you know, very capably moves from some real pathos in terms of talking about, you know, what had happened to the Star Driver and his experiences with their encounter with the Gorn to, you know, some of the sort of funnier moments, like when he meets Pelia, his former academy instructor again. Like, it was just so well done. The character integrated really quickly. And, you know, I think I might like for Scotty to stick around on the Enterprise. I think he'd be a cool addition to the cast going forward.
I agree. And I think too, like, as I was watching, one thing that really struck me was that having him appear and the way that he was used did not feel gratuitous at all, or like he was shoehorned in, which I got to be honest. And I'll preface this by saying I adore Paul Wesley's Kirk. Like, I'm sold. He's fantastic. He's doing a wonderful job, especially with the 3 different variants of Kirk that we've seen. Again, my hat's off to him for being able to do that and distinguish between the 3 different versions. But it has felt to me in a couple of instances like his appearance is unnecessary. Like, why is Kirk doing this and not a different character or a character that we haven't spent as much time with? And that didn't feel like the case with Scotty. Like, he was in the right place at the right time, and the use of him worked.
Yeah, I love Paul Wesley's performance as Kirk as well, but I think I put this in the review that I wrote for Subspace Rhapsody. They, in my mind, have probably run out of contrivances for reasons to have Kirk show up in the show.
Yeah, and Subspace Rhapsody felt real clunky in terms of the reasoning behind it.
I mean, you've done 2 alternate versions and then 2 appearances of regular Kirk, where it's like, okay, he's here, and this time he's here for this reason, and this time he's here for this reason. And it's just like, I don't know how many more episodes you can ultimately do that. Which, again, is not like, I think Kirk's role in this season has been a really excellent one for advancing La'an's arc. And so, like, as much as I'm like, really, we've done this, 4 or 5 times now? You know, it's not like I want to take back any of those appearances, but it is like, as we move into season 3, you know, if we're looking at sort of legacy Star Trek characters to appear, maybe we de-emphasize Kirk a little bit in favor of, you know, potentially Scotty or something like that.
Yeah. And I'm really enjoying Paul Wesley's Kirk. I like seeing him, but yeah, I'm with you. Let's move on. This is still Pike's Enterprise. Let's move on from Kirk for a while.
So how are you feeling about the Gorn?
Oh man. So for our listeners, if you have not watched The Ready Room for this week, for this episode, you need to, especially if behind the scenes stuff and creature creation and effects is your jam, because most of The Ready Room this week is all about the creation of the Gorn. And as a former theater person, it was just fascinating to me to see how much of it was practical effects and puppetry and how comparatively little was CGI. I mean, this is a guy in a suit, and it's not a rubber suit. It's a high-tech animatronic, fantastically made suit, but it's a guy in a suit. And I think that it absolutely, what we see on screen absolutely benefits from that. There are bits that are digital, but it's a person in a suit. I think that they've opened some really interesting threads here with the first part with the Gorn, and I'm interested, and I'm a little scared about part 2, because there's another bit in this interview in Vulture that we're talking about where Henry Myers is saying that when they wrote it, when they filmed it, they didn't really know how part 2 was going to go. And that scares me a little bit in terms of how is this setup going to feed into part 2? And there are a lot of interesting threads that I hope they pick up, that if they're not certain how they're going to get to part 2, might just get thrown by the wayside. I'm very interested in this sunspot and solar flares thing that Scotty is talking about, that Sam Kirk is picking up on. I'm also interested in the thread that they've opened with potentially reaching the Gorn working together, that La'an and Pike saw, where the younglings were working together rather than competing. So I think there's a lot of really interesting fodder, and I feel like this episode did a pretty okay job of moving us past some of the concerns, not all of them, but some of the concerns with all those who wander, where the Gorn were just these mindless monsters. I think we're starting to get to a place where now there's more going on here.
Yeah, there've been this Vulture interview is not the only finale interview. A couple of others. Henry, I think the Variety one, in addition to Henry Alonso Myers, Akiva Goldsman was there as well. And we covered on this show earlier in the season, Goldsman was talking about the Gorn and about, you know, how he was looking to create a race that was just all, you know, like violence and nightmare, and you know that the natural Star Trek thing to do is look for the other side of it, look for the compassion, and he was interested in just doing something that's like, nope, sometimes there are just purely evil things, and here's one of those things. And he repeated those comments again this week in relation to the finale, and I'm not going to fully finish this thought because I want to come back to it at the end of the episode because it's my theory.
Ooh.
I kind of think he's playing with us a little bit. I mean, some of the things that you have just mentioned, I think lay breadcrumbs and groundwork for actually doing some reconciling of the Gorn that we have seen in Strange New Worlds with the Gorn that we've seen in TOS, and, you know, sort of like evolving the race and not having them just be nightmare evil dinosaurs who are obsessed with killing you
or turning you into an egg sack.
Right. So yeah, I mean, from that perspective, this is probably my favorite of the Gorn episodes, because I potentially sense there is a new layer of nuance that lives beneath the race that I did not see in either Memento Mori or All Those Who Wander. I mean, I know lots of people love those episodes. The more I watch them, the less either of them really works for me, just because of the sort of Gorn thing.
I agree with you in that this is probably my favorite of the 3 Gorn episodes we've had so far. I still, my hat is still off to Memento Mori though, because it made us really scared of something that we never saw. And I thought that was incredibly effectively done.
Yeah, it's a good episode. I mean, it's not like it's at the bottom of my list for the season. It's probably, I don't know, it's probably right around the middle somewhere for season 1 of Strange New Worlds. It's just like, I don't know, the whole Gorn part of both of those episodes just has never really vibed with me. And partially that is because of the Akiva Goldsman comments about, like, you know, these are just evil dinosaurs who want to eat you or lay their eggs in you, you know, and there's nothing else to it. But I sense in this episode that's not the case.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going somewhere else, especially when we saw I think that the spacesuited adult was a real signpost towards, this is reinforcing that this is a spacefaring race. They have advanced technology. Their society does function in some way where they can collaborate enough to develop this. I mean, objectively, we know it because we've seen their ships. We've seen elements of their technology, like their disruptor field. But I think there's a different feeling that comes when you see a member of that species in technology, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a long wait.
I know I'm not alone. I'm joining the entirety of Trek Twitter, at least those of us who are old enough to remember the summer of Best of Both Worlds.
That was 3 months. This
that was only 3 months. Yeah,
to 24.
we're all gonna be sitting here going, yeah, remember Best of Both Worlds? That was a good time.
Yeah.
I do wonder. I am just curious. I mean, there's the bit with Best of Both Worlds where part of that cliffhanger, right, was that there was some uncertainty about whether Patrick Stewart was coming back, right?
Yes.
And so I do have a little bit of curiosity as to whether that is any bit of a factor here.
Because of the sort of lingering rumors that Anson Mount maybe is not sticking around.
I don't know if I'd call it necessarily Anson, but I could see that being one of the reasons why Batel's fate is kind of nebulous. They don't know if she's willing to come back for season 3 as a recurring. You could also wind up in that same boat with Christina Chong or Melissa Navia. I mean, or even Carol Kane. I mean, I'm going through the relatively short list of characters who do not have plot armor at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't kill any major characters this season, but maybe that's because they were just waiting for the premiere episode of season 3 in order to do that to you. So yeah, I mean, but like that is one of the sort of best things about Hegemony as an episode. You sort of get to the end of it, and there is sort of that palpable sense that, like, well, maybe none of these characters are safe, right? Like, you know, obviously, to your point, right? Like, you know, Uhura's not going to die, and, you know, Sam Kirk's not going to die, and, you know, there are a few others who, you know, it's like the rest of Star Trek tells us this is not their time. But there are lots of characters for whom, you know, there is that sort of palpable sense of, well, maybe the show does continue without X or Y or Z, and, you know, that's going to set up for a big season 3 premiere when we get the chance to watch it in 18 to 24 months.
Yeah, I'm calling it probably 2 years.
Well, because Weekly Trek was taking a break last week while I was at STLV, this is also the first chance we have to talk about the 9th episode of Strange New Worlds' 2nd season, that being the groundbreaking musical episode Subspace Rhapsody. Henry Alonso Myers and co-showrunner Akiva Goldsman talked to IndieWire about the musical episode. Speaking about the episode's role in the season, Goldsman said, quote, "The thing that made it a comfortable fit is that it's still essentially a Star Trek episode, and not just a Star Trek episode, but the Star Trek episode that needed to be the episode 9 of our 10-episode season. We need resolution in order to get us into episode 10, which in this case, Henry was going to write part 1 of a 2-parter. I wish I'd read this interview, or I'm glad I didn't read this interview before I watched the season finale, because then I would have realized that it was going to be a cliffhanger.
I did. I read this interview before Hegemony came out, so I went into Hegemony pretty much expecting what we got in terms of the cliffhanger.
I mean, by the last 15 minutes, I was like, they ain't wrapping this up in the next 15 minutes. There's definitely a cliffhanger coming. But yeah, Myers also talked about how Subspace Rhapsody was designed to be an important episode for a number of the character arcs. We tried to bring in an attitude about it that the show shouldn't just be silly, Myers said. The show should be emotional and should reach a place where you feel things, not just as a left turn for a couple of minutes to show us something, but to actually reveal things. We tried to find moments for everybody based very loosely on what we knew to be people's abilities and what we wanted to say. The producers revealed that the whole Strange New Worlds cast were offered vocal lessons in the lead up to filming this episode, as well as the opportunity to re-record their songs for the final mix. But after all the prep everyone put into the episode, many stayed with the recordings made on set rather than take them up on the offer to re-record. The producers also talked about the creative process of having multiple drafts of the different songs flying back and forth. Quote, "It's one of those things where even when you want to make changes and deal with notes, it ends up everything moves slower because you're changing the entire song as opposed to just rewriting a scene," Myers said. This all had to happen before lyricist Tom Pulse and Kay Hanley had also come to Toronto, where Strange New Worlds shoots, to sit down with all of our actors and get a sense of their abilities and what they were comfortable with and not comfortable with. Part of that was just literally just designing songs for everyone that would speak to their strengths, because we wanted something that everyone could participate in. And Akiva Goldsman also reveals that Subspace Rhapsody was the culmination of a dream that actually started on Star Trek Picard. Michael Chabon, the showrunner for Star Trek Picard, and I did with Picard for a minute, Goldsman said, about contemplating a musical episode. "We were sitting around in the Borg cube in season 1, and Michelle Hurd and Michael and I were sort of just waxing rhapsodic about the possibility. Michael went, 'I know Lin-Manuel Miranda, I'm going to call him.' And here we have Subspace Rhapsody." Chris, what was your reaction to Star Trek's first musical episode?
Well, first, I just want to say all the credit in the world and all the thanks in the world to the cast and the crew and the production team that put this together. As I mentioned actually earlier in the episode, I am a former theater person. I have done musicals, and I am very aware of what it takes to put this together. So all the thanks in the world to everyone that worked so hard on this. I really was pleasantly surprised at how well the premise of it hung together in terms of the why are we singing. I thought that they actually did a really good job in finding an explanation where you didn't have to squint too hard to make it make sense. So I really liked that. I did feel like a couple of the arc wind-ups were a little unsatisfying, specifically like the Spock Chapel wind-up. It just felt like that all of the time that we've spent with them has been pointless if it's going to end like this. This was another one where I was kind of on the fence about the use of Kirk. I did like how that arc with him and La'an wrapped up. I found that good, but again, it was one of those things like, did we really have to go here, or could we have spent more time with the actual Enterprise crew? So it's, in terms of my rankings for the season, it's probably it's in the middle of my list. I enjoyed it, but I didn't think it was one of the strongest of the season.
What was your favorite song?
Oh, so I'm gonna join the masses and say "Keep Us Connected" was my favorite, because Celia Rose Gooding has the voice of an angel.
Yeah, from the moment that one showed up in the trailer, I was like, oh, I think this is going to be a lot of people's favorites. Yep.
But Spock's song is a very strong second for me. And it did not come across that way to me in the episode. It really grew on me as I listened to the soundtrack. And I did really enjoy what they did with the counterpoint between Chapel's song and then Spock's song being in the minor key. Yeah. I thought that was a neat touch. But yeah, so Keep Us Connected, and then I'm the X, and then if I have to pick something in third place, it's probably Chapel's song.
Status Report's my favorite.
That's a good one. It's a great ensemble number.
It's a great ensemble number, and the thing that I like about it the most is it is the only song in all of them that uses the unique language of Star Trek as part of the music, because you know it's sort of like it's not a full-on technobabble song, but it does have, you know, sort of technobabbly elements to it where they're sort of naming all of the different systems and how well they're functioning. And I just love that. That was sort of, for me, that was the point at which they were like, we're not just doing a musical, we're doing a Star Trek musical, and this is something unique about Star Trek and something unique about doing a musical that's blended together into one experience. And so that for me was like my favorite part of the episode. I really like the rest of it. I'm a big fan of Subspace Rhapsody. I did buy the official soundtrack. I have listened to it probably more times than I care to admit to. I go to bed and right now, and the songs are running around in my head. I wake up in the morning and the songs are running around in my head. It's actually a little bit tortuous, but that's just the way that it is when you have a nice earworm like that.
They did come up with some really great earworms. And you know what was really funny the other day? So I work in downtown, which in St. Paul is connected via Skyway. And I'm walking back, or I'm walking out of my building in the Skyway, walking to the parking ramp, and I passed somebody and they were humming "Keep Us Connected." They were humming "Keep Us Connected," and
That's
it took
funny.
me a minute, like, you know, that delayed processing thing that happens.
Sure.
And it took a minute for me to realize what it was, but it was unmistakable. And I had to stop myself from being really, really creepy and turning around, being like, wait, fellow nerd, come back.
Yeah, I love that. And I love, you know, I also agree with you. I think the sort of premise for the episode was very well done. It didn't feel weird or unnatural to me in a way that like a Star Trek musical very easily could have. I mean, I know it's not for everybody, and I know there are people for whom it's just not their thing and it's never going to be their thing, and that's fine, right? Like, as I've talked about on this episode before, I think it's cool when Star Trek makes big swings, does experimental things. This was an experiment they tried and it worked for a ton of people, and there are lots of people who really, really like it, in addition to there being people who really, really don't. And like, I'm one of the people who really, really liked it. I would say the other thing I really liked about it too, that Henry Alonso Myers talked about in that interview, was sort of the sense that they were looking to do an episode that was important to the season. And it really is, right? Like, if you're like, I hate musicals and I'm never going to watch Subspace Rhapsody again, and then you watch season 2, you're actually missing some really important character plot points for the whole season if you do that, because it's not a throwaway, forgettable episode. There are major developments for the Spock Chapel relationship, for the La'an Kirk relationship, that are the culmination of several episodes worth of build-up. In the case of La'an Kirk, beginning with Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and then going through Lost in Translation for the Spock Chapel relationship, beginning in Broken Circle, passing through Charades, passing through Those Old Scientists, and now ending up at Subspace Rhapsody, not to mention the stuff from last season. So, you know, it is a really important episode, and it's an important episode that just happened to be a musical, and some of those songs are really good, and it's a fun episode. You know, like, also, you know, whether musicals work for you or not, like, the cast is just clearly having a really great time making this episode, and that's infectious. It really is, you know, sort of like, it helps kind of elevate the episode because everybody's having a good time, and it's fun to watch people have a good time.
You can definitely tell in the finale in We Are One, you can absolutely tell who has done musical theater and who has not.
Yeah, sure.
In some of in the dancing, just and maybe this is just, you know, me looking at it through the lens of a theater person, but I can go down the line and go, yep, nope, yep.
Yeah, I don't think Babs has a lot of musical theater background.
No, and I love that they went with it, where he was like, I do not sing.
Yeah,
I love that they went with it, that they were just like, okay, yep, he does not sing.
Babs was me in high school. I was a theater kid in high school, and but the one thing I always told people was that I wouldn't sing. I was a dramatic actor. I was not a singer, and so I would not audition for the musicals. But I got approached about one of them, and I said, well, you know my rules. I don't sing, and they said, don't worry, it's a non-singing part. So that was the only one I was part of.
Well, my background is in backstage. So I was a stage manager and a set designer and a lighting designer and a props person and all of that. So nobody wants to hear me sing.
Nobody wants to hear me sing either, I can assure you.
Although I will say that Chapel's song would be a good karaoke song for me, because that's in my range.
Yeah, and it's a great song too.
Mhm.
As long as you've got like 6 or 7 people nearby to, let you crowd surf on.
Right. And I didn't really enjoy and that's another scene, to your point, where the cast is just having a great time doing this. And I
Yeah.
think that you really see that especially in Chapel's song, with all of them jamming in the bar, and Uhura and Sam Kirk are really getting into it, and they're all clearly having a great time.
I mean, that song to me really is the one where it's like, I mean, clearly everyone was told to act like they're having a great time, but you can also tell when people are genuinely having a great time and when it's like for the camera, and they're genuinely having a great time doing that. I think in that, it just sort of resonates off the screen in a way that is very likable.
100%.
Well, switching gears to Star Trek Prodigy, the show's creators, Kevin and Dan Hageman, and the senior production team appeared at STLV last weekend and debuted a first look at season 2, which they are still confident will find a streaming home for all to enjoy. The 4.5-minute clip from the season 2 premiere features 2 big character introductions, that being Robert Picardo reprising his Star Trek Voyager role as the Doctor, and the introduction of the USS Voyager A, the successor to the USS Voyager from Star Trek Voyager. Let's listen to the clip.
What? Who let these criminals apply for Starfleet? Oh, not gonna lie. Feels good to see everybody again. I wish our Starfleet divisions crossed paths more. Whoa, Jenko, looking spiffy.
Yeah! Jacob takes sonic showers now. You should try it sometime. Oh, no. Jacob is sorry. That was rude. Jacob is working on being more polite.
A marked improvement, if somewhat disturbing to see in a Tellarite.
I just wish Gwen was here.
She's probably Queen of Solum by now. I'd take that over this study snooze fest any day.
Snooze Fest? Do you know what a mega huge super deal this is? Admiral Janeway's about to take us under her wing on a real Starfleet ship. This is our big chance.
A fancy internship with her is gonna look pretty nice to the Academy Admission Board.
You're not Janeway.
No, I'm the Doctor. An emergency medical holographic program and dear friend of the Admiral. Member of the Voyager crew. Hero of the Delta Quadrant. No? Nothing? Well, Catherine asked me to be your personal escort.
Oh, great! Yeah, there you go.
I said escort. I'm a doctor, not a butler.
Another hologram? But how are you off the ship?
Mobile emitter. I'm no average hologram. I've come to learn you care deeply for your former ETH. That bond reminds me of a holo novel I once penned, which was very well received. Anyway, I'm sure you'll grow to love me just as much as you loved hologram Janeway.
Yeah, okay, hologram. I mean, you're right. Probably.
So, what's the mission? A new scrap with the Borg? Take down a galactic warlord. Save Starfleet. Again.
Actually, something you should be familiar with. Starfleet has asked the Admiral to observe a new wormhole to deem if it poses a threat.
That's the wormhole we created when we self-destructed the Protostar.
Very astute. After a rigorous probe survey, we picked up Captain Chakotay's SOS transmission from the other side, on the planet Solum. 52 years in the future.
But isn't Gwyn heading to Solum right now?
Solum may well be 2 different worlds. The Solum of today that Gwyn is heading to is peaceful. Future Solum has been torn apart by civil war, spurred by first contact with the Federation that hasn't happened yet.
So Gwyn schmoozes with the locals, and if they play nice, it means a better future for everybody. Right?
Today Solum, future Solum. This timey-wimey stuff hurts my head.
Sounds like somebody never read Temporal Mechanics 101.
I'll leave the science stuff to you. Put me in the captain's chair.
So, what starship are we taking, Doctor? A protostar class?
The protostar is still under construction. Think bigger.
What's with the faces?
It's Voyager, but not like Jacob's ever seen it.
Her predecessor is a floating museum, so Janeway thought it was high time for an upgrade. Lamar Special Class Science Vessel, refitted stem to stern with the latest and greatest technology from our journeys, and then some.
29 decks, 800 plus crew, 2 schools.
Admiral Janeway back at the helm of a brand new ship?
You're fortunate to continue your studies on Voyager, with the rest of Starfleet busy with the Romulan evacuation. Janeway learned a captain was needed for the maiden voyage, so she answered the call.
Well, that ship has some ample nacelles, and if you haven't watched this clip yet, I strongly encourage you to check it out for the first time and get your first look at the Lamar class Voyager A, because she is a real beaut. Chris, what was your reaction to the first look at Star Trek Prodigy Season 2?
I'm so excited for this, and it sounds like they're very confident that it's going to find a new home, and
Yeah.
I love hearing that. Because I think Prodigy is just the unsung hero of Star Trek. I mean, I'm echoing the words of others when I say this, but how else are you going to introduce a new generation to Star Trek if not this way? It is well crafted. It is Star Trek made not simple, not trite, but I think boiled down to the essence of what Star Trek is for a younger audience. And it's a perfect gateway for the next generation to come into this franchise, to these series. And then you get to the big leagues of the more complex stories, the more gray areas. And that's not to say that Prodigy isn't tackling gray areas, because they absolutely are, but it's in a slightly different format. So I'm thrilled that it seems like Prodigy is going to find a new home. I am so happy to see Robert Picardo back.
Yeah.
That was such a treat. And he still sounds like the Doctor. It's so great. Because sometimes you get actors who come back to do voiceover work for animation or things like that, and they don't sound like their old selves.
Yep.
And while it's lovely to have them back, it is a little bit jarring just knowing like they don't sound like they used to. Robert Picardo sounds like he was just filming Voyager yesterday.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I love this clip. And, it's funny, right? Like, we knew the Voyager A was going to be in season 2. Nobody said that Robert Picardo was going to be in it as the Doctor, but, they'd sort of hinted that there were going to be more Voyager characters showing up. And, it'd be a safe bet to say that the Doctor would be one of them. So, like, if you sort of had in your mind that was going to happen, and of course, we knew the Voyager A thing was going to happen, it's one thing to theorize about it and feel pretty confident you've gotten it right. It's another thing to then like actually see it for the first time, hear Bob Picardo playing the Doctor again, seeing this really quite gorgeous Voyager A ship. Like, it's got, obviously it harkens back to the original Intrepid class design, but it's got sort of a sovereignty feel to it. It's also got like a bit of a protostar thing going on. I mean, it's uniquely its own ship, but also while having elements of other kind of ships that are important to Prodigy or to Voyager, sort of amalgamated together. And I can't wait for us to see the inside of the ship and start getting the opportunity to explore. I really hope that, this is not a one episode thing for Bob Picardo, that he's going to be in it throughout the season. Certainly sounds like he's posted on the Voyager A, and most of the season is going to take place on the Voyager A. So like, I think fingers crossed for that one. But yeah, like this, like they couldn't have brought a better 4.5 minutes to really whet the appetite for Star Trek fans for Prodigy season 2. And as we were saying, right, like no definitive announcements at STLV. It's not like they came and said, yeah, we can confirm that Netflix or Apple or whoever is picking this up and they're going to be the one to broadcast season 2 and have season 1 up available for streaming as well. But like, it's clear conversations are underway. It's clear there's a high degree of confidence among the Prodigy production team, and the highest degree of confidence that even if their very high degree of confidence about a streaming deal doesn't come through, that we will end up seeing season 2 of Prodigy, even if, we have to wait for the Blu-ray release in order to do that. That's almost certainly, right? Like, it's not going into a vault. No one will ever see it again, or at least this is the only 4.5 minutes we'll ever see a Prodigy season 2. It's coming. There's 20 episodes of Prodigy for us to look forward to. We just have to wait a bit longer to find out exactly when and where we will have the opportunity to see more of the Voyager A, and I am eager to see more of the Voyager A.
And we want to keep making noise about it. That I have seen is helping them, is the fan responses to the news and to what has happened with Prodigy, and even the new clip is that we're making noise and we are helping them sell it to a new home.
Exactly. The more we indicate that this is something we want, the more people will pay attention that this is something we want, because ultimately people only do things in this space if people want it. And in order for them to know that we want it, we have to say that we want it. So
do you have a sense of where the best home would be for it among the streamers?
I don't. I mean, you would maybe think, I don't know why they would ever do it, but you would maybe think, I'm sure there are lots of parents that have Disney Plus subscriptions because there's lots of, sort of content for children on Disney Plus. And so, like, that would be an obvious home for it. But I think that's probably the least likely home for it, given Disney has its own Star franchise that it feels pretty good about. But I mean, they got the Orville now too. So, they're definitely branching out in their science fiction universe front. But really beyond that, I don't know. I mean, you have to figure it's Netflix, Amazon, Apple, Hulu, which is owned by Disney, or what's the other one? Peacock, NBC. It feels like Amazon, Netflix would probably be the two likeliest ones, just from the perspective of there have been pre-existing business relationships between Paramount and Netflix and Amazon related to international distribution for Star Trek. But, which one's ultimately the right destination for Prodigy, what it means, once they potentially pick one of those or a different one for the possibility, likelihood, not a possibility for more of it, who knows? My real hope is that, we're almost in mid-August now, that by the end of this year, we know where it's going to be, because I would really like, as it stands right now, if there's no Prodigy in 2024, we'll get 10 episodes of Lower Decks and 10 episodes of Discovery, and that will be it. So I would really like for us to know that somewhere, somehow, somewhere across the internet, there will be some Star Trek Prodigy for us to enjoy in 2024, as we are, sort of waiting for Hollywood to spin back up again and give us season 3 of Stranger Worlds and Starfleet Academy and some of that other stuff.
Yeah, I think to your point, I agree with you that Disney is probably the least likely, but I could see them being attracted to it from a merchandising perspective.
And they picked up Doctor Who too. I mean, then they're the international distributor for Doctor Who now. That's shifted from BBC America to Disney Plus. So, like, if they're collecting science fiction franchises, Star Trek's not a bad one.
Yeah, get the whole set.
Exactly, yeah. Get all the Infinity Stones.
Netflix is also, I think, is a strong contender, just because they have been interested in animated product. Like, they've still got Dragon Prince going on right now. So I think Netflix could be a strong contender. Apple is doing some really fun things with some interesting product. It doesn't feel like it's the right fit for Apple. And maybe that's just because of the content that I consume from Apple tends to be very gritty and serious. Like, I watch Foundation and I've been watching Silo. So maybe that's my lens being skewed. But I feel like if I had to, put down $100 on one of the big streamers, I would say Netflix.
Yeah, I guess it just comes down to what is the relationship between Paramount and Netflix after the international Discovery distribution deal blew up a couple of years ago. Are there hard feelings or not?
Right. Yeah, like I said, if you're going to make me put $100 on something, I'd probably put it on Netflix. And if you made me put another 100 on something, it would probably be Disney.
Hey, we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Yep.
Well, and lastly this week, 1/6 Star Trek figure company XO6 are stepping up their teasers, reveals, and pre-orders as we approach the end of 2023. In addition to recent pre-order releases for Tom Paris from Voyager, Data from The Next Generation, Kieran Reese from Deep Space Nine, and most recently Lord Krug from Star Trek III: The Search for Spock, XO6 have also unveiled a first look at their line of 1/6 scale action figures from Star Trek: Strange New Worlds. Captain Pike, Mr. Spock, Number 1, Nurse Chapel, and La'an Noonien Singh have been previewed so far, with official pre-orders opening for the first figures soon. I had a chance to look at these in person at STLV last weekend, and the Pike and Spock look particularly good. I am very excited for these, as I am with the upcoming Picard Season 3 figures, and for Krug, and for Kira, and for Data, all three of which I have placed a pre-order for. Chris, if you could get any Star Trek character as a 1/6 scale action figure, who would you pick?
Oh, these just look so great. These are fantastic. You know, I'm gonna maybe take a big swing here, and I'm gonna say I want an action figure of Hemmer because he got done dirty and he deserves an action figure.
I think it looked great. They just did. I literally just opened the box for Shran today, who they did from Enterprise, and he looks great. So they're good at doing Andorians, so they should be pretty good at doing Enar as well.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm still mad about that, but I'm still mad about that.
Oh, I'm still mad about that. It was nice. They've not a lot of people realized that the Klingon general from Subspace Rhapsody was Bruce Horak, which I just thought was wonderful.
It was wonderful, and he got to come back for Lost in Translation. Which was fantastic. I loved him getting to do that, and the way that they incorporated him into the episode. That was a standout for me. But I'm still mad about it.
I would not be mad if Bruce Horak ended up becoming the Jeffrey Combs of Star Trek: Strange New Worlds, and he
Definitely
came back as a new
that.
character each season. I think that would be a lot of fun and a nice homage to Star Trek's history, and a way to sort of keep an actor engaged with the Star Trek franchise who you were dumb enough to kill off at the end of season 1.
I would definitely not be mad about that. Fan campaign for that. Bruce Horak, the new Jeffrey Combs.
Yeah, I mean, the fan campaign to actually get Jeffrey Combs onto Strange New Worlds didn't work, so the least we can do is have Bruce Horak become the Jeffrey Combs of Strange New Worlds.
I love it.
All right, well, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain. But it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, my guests and I give you a wish or theory we're nurturing about any of the shows or the future of the franchise. So Chris, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
My wish is that the strike is resolved tomorrow so that Strange New Worlds can start gearing back up for season 3.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I'm not alone in that wish. So I'll go with a theory instead. And I hope I don't steal your thunder with this, but
please go for it.
I'm gonna do a little bit of a theory on the Gorn. I really think that I feel like we are going to see some really interesting stuff in terms of the life cycle of the Gorn, because in the Ready Room they talk about starting with the design of the adult Gorn all the way back in season 1 and reverse engineering it to get to the babies, which is fascinating from a design perspective. But I also think that there's maybe some method to that madness, that the life cycle is going to be important, and how they develop is maybe keys into that difference that we saw in Hegemony, where they're working together instead of fighting. And so I think we're going to really get some interesting world building with the Gorn, and that they're going to be a lot more complex than we think they are. Like you said, I do think Akiva Goldsman might be playing with us a bit.
Well, before I come back to that, I'll just say on your strike wish, latest news today, the WGA and the PTP sat down to begin negotiations again, which was a surprise after they'd had a meeting last week that had very much not gone well. The initial thinking was it would take a while for them to get back to the table. Well, they're back to the table today, and there was an update from the WGA that was basically like, we think we owe it to the process not to tell you what's going on at the moment so that we can actually get down to the business of truly negotiating with them, which is a good sign, because I think it means that they sense that management is more interested in striking a deal than they have been previously. Obviously, this could all still fall apart, but like, of all the possible outcomes from the meeting today, this was probably one of the most positive, realistically, that there was, which is like, we don't have anything to say right now because, you know, we want to like get on with the business of actually negotiating something.
I saw that as well, where they did apparently get a counter proposal today.
Yeah.
And I agree with you in terms that we're not hearing details seems to be a good sign, because in previous meetings where the AMPTP has come and said this thing is a non-starter, that thing is a non-starter, or whatever, those details have gotten out very quickly.
Yeah, if the negotiating committee thought that the MPTP's position counter-proposal was an absolute non-starter, they would have immediately told everybody, they're still playing with us, this is a complete nonsense, and we're not doing this, we're back on the picket lines. And the fact they didn't, hopefully, is hopeful. Now, unfortunately, that even if that means that, the writer's strike is, let's say, 30 days away from being resolved, well, the actor's strike is only 10 days old, and the writer strike is now 100 days old. So if that's your sort of length for striking, we still have 90 more actor strike days to go before they get resolved, and then Strange New Worlds season 3 can get underway. But both of them do have to be resolved in order for this for things to get back to normal. And so the sooner one's done, the better, and the sooner both of them are done, the better. And hopefully both are done in a way that provides a fair deal for both writers and actors.
I do think that it's a good sign that they're trying to negotiate with the writers first, because it seems like the whole thing of eat the elephant one bite at a time. So it makes sense to me that they're not trying to resolve both at once. But the actors are by far the larger of the unions. And I think that the pressure to resolve with the writers would be a lot more intense if SAG-AFTRA got sorted first. Mm-hmm. So I see it as it's actually a good sign that the writers are in a good position to get a fair contract if they're being negotiated with first.
All right, let's transition to talking about the Gorn. Yep. And I will give you my theory, which is somewhat aligned with the one that you outlined, but I want to take it a step further, which is that I am sort of fixated on this sort of sunspot thing, right? The specific line about them basically saying that particular solar activity that the Gorn are very sensitive to, and it, quote, set off a consumption cycle, right? Like, because the whole episode is sort of like, why have the Gorn done this? Why have they attacked this planet? Why have they killed all of these people? This doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense that they're behaving this way, even though, like last season we saw they're just like mindless killers who want to either kill you or lay eggs in you and then kill you. And, there's sort of that thing about, well, that doesn't feel like the Gorn that we saw in TOS. And I don't know. I just personally keep coming back to this idea that there's so many things that Strange New Worlds has gotten right that them not landing the Gorn plane in a what I would consider Star Trek-y way feels out of character for them. And what I mean by landing the plane in a Star Trek-y way also is we've had 2 Gorn episodes now in the season 1 episodes, Memento Mori and All Those Who Wander, that were just straight like shoot your way out of this, right? Like Memento Mori is a submarine story about trying to kill the enemy before they kill you and succeeding. All Those Who Wander is a horror in which it's like you have to kill the Gorn before they kill you. And like there's no real, like, they're both for many people great episodes, but there's no real sort of like level of nuance that lives beneath that. It's just kill them before they kill you. That's the whole point of those 2 episodes. Well, now we have a 3rd episode that in part 1 is sort of picking up and continuing that thread of kill them before they kill you. I don't know that the Strange New Worlds writers are so uncreative as to take that idea now into a 4th episode. And I think they have laid the groundwork for a part 2 that, yes, I'm sure is going to be filled with lots of action and gross Gorn and, Gorn babies bursting out of Captain Patel's chest.
Oh.
But that fundamentally will be about what I think, which is that they're going to discover that this sort of sunspot activity is what's making these Gorn raving, murderous lunatics, and they're going to come up with a sciencey way of basically, like, fixing the Gorn, so to speak, right? Like that they will discover that all of this unusual solar activity has sort of created all of this unintended behavior within this race, and Starfleet will like help them figure out how to like settle down and be, you know, normal again. And in that sense, a bit more like the kind of, you know, sort of thematically and spiritually the Gorn that we saw in Arena, right? Like the whole point of that episode, the whole point of Arena is that, yes, it's a big scary lizard monster, but actually it's a big scary lizard monster who's more like us than you think they are. And like, it's just like Strange New Worlds and the Strange New Worlds creative team entirely abandoning effectively the whole point of Arena just doesn't sit right with me in terms of, I don't think like, I'll just say it this way. I don't think that that's stupid, because I do think that's a really interesting angle on the Gorn that TOS spent 10 minutes playing with at the end of the episode, that with a little more wind up, and I think we're still in the wind-up phase, you could explore in much more depth and detail in Strange New Worlds over the course of a few episodes. But in order to do that, in order to flip, in order to go from scary lizard monster that literally wants to eat you and explode its babies out of your chest, to this is an alien race that is not misunderstood, but like, you know, has its own things going on, and like there is a way to connect with them, and we can see past the horror of it all to create a sense of connection and diplomacy and learning from each other. Like, I hope that's the direction that they're going in. If that's the direction they're going in, it's so well done, and I'm all in for it, because they really did take us into the heart of darkness and then give us a rewarding Star Trek story that comes out of it. If they don't do that, and it really just is the heart of darkness thing, and they just love doing the action-filled episodes and just like Gorn and chest bursters and all that stuff, then it's going to be my least favorite thing about Strange New Worlds. You know, and I said on Twitter the other day when I posted my rankings for Hegemony, where I think it's like number 5 out of 10 for season 2 of Strange New Worlds. Part 2 will make part 1 go up the list, or it'll make it go down the list. I think I see the components and the ingredients there for a really rewarding story that's less about killing and that's more about finding understanding. That will be part 2, but we'll have to wait 18 to 24 months to see if I'm right. Chris, what do you think?
I'm 100% on board with this, where, well, and with several things that you said, I feel exactly the same way about the rankings, where Hegemony is smack dab in the middle of my list right now, but it's so hard to rank a 2-parter without seeing the second part, because you don't quite know where it's going. You don't know how well it's performed its job to set up the rest of the story. So I feel like putting it in the middle of my rankings at the moment is precisely where it should be, until we know what part 2 looks like. Because as you very correctly point out, it could go up, it could go down. I love what you've outlined here with the quintessential Star Trekness of where this could go. And I think, like you said, they have really set it up to go there. I think the sunspot activity is a fantastic idea. I don't know if you've ever read Andy Weir's book, Project Hail Mary.
No.
Okay, so to avoid spoilers for anybody who might be wanting to read it, the premise is a life form that feeds on sunlight. They eat sunlight. That's how they make energy. And for some reason, as you were talking about this, that popped into my head as this life form that depends on the sun and has this unintended effect of screwing over planet Earth because they're absorbing too much sunlight and our planet starts freezing. But I can see some parallels there with what you're saying about like the sunspot activity or the solar activity turns the Gorn into these monsters. I mean, for all we know, this is a sliver of Gorn society,
right,
that has unintentionally gone bonkers because they've been exposed to these solar flares. Now, there's some holes in that, I think, in terms of the Gorn that we saw on Valio Beta 5. We're in the same boat. And so I think that there's some complexity there. But there's a lot of promise for, like you said, the quintessential Star Trek story of making connection with different life forms, with life forms that are so different than what we know. And on the surface, it looks like there is no possible way to connect, and yet we find a way.
That's Star Trek. That's interesting. And
Yes.
like, and that doesn't have to happen within the first 50 minutes, right? And like, build me the trail of breadcrumbs and make me walk down it and make me, you know, like suffer through killing Hemmer and chest bursting and, you know, like dinosaur lizard, evil, to then give me that redemption story at the end. Like, that's Star Trek. And like, it's either genius that Akiva is just telling you the first half of the story, or he totally misunderstands the whole franchise and like is setting up what, in my opinion, is like one of Star Trek's biggest misfires in terms of wasted potential for a thing. There are lots of people who have lots of criticism about Akiva Goldsman. People who are in group chats that I am in know that one of my favorite things to do is to blame him for everything that I like remotely don't like about modern Star Trek, and I do it mostly tongue-in-cheek because I actually think, you know, he has brought a ton of really great ideas to the table, has done a ton of cool stuff, but like I don't know, like I just sense that we're at this point where they've told us this great story and they could turn this great story into an amazing story, or they could turn this great story into, you know, we just wanted to do some horror stuff on Star Trek and then we wanted to do it again and then we wanted to do it again, and we don't really have anything more to say about this or anything more to do with it other than that. And I have faith
of the heart, Alex.
I have faith of the heart, and that faith of the heart will now have to stay strong for over a year until we see how this cliffhanger ultimately resolves.
I'm sorry, I couldn't. You set that one up for
I
me.
sure did.
I could not resist a swing at that one. I do, every time I see Akiva on the Ready Room, I do get the sense that he's like this your slightly bonkers uncle who always has this little aura of, I know something you don't know.
Yes, he does always have a twinkle in his eye, and it's like, you know, am I just reading into the existence of the twinkle, or is there actually a twinkle there? And I'm choosing to believe right now that there is a twinkle and that there's a big payoff coming for it.
I think you're right. I think the twinkle's there. I do. And yeah, I'm excited. I really am. I will very carefully nurture my excitement so that it lasts for the next 18 to 24 months. But I am excited. I think that this does really have a lot of potential to pay off and to be in the same category as Best of Both Worlds in terms of great Star Trek two-parters.
I mean, I think it has the potential to stick the landing better than Best of Both Worlds Part 2 does, right? Like, Best of Both Worlds Part 1 is an undisputable, amazing, classic episode. And then Part 2 is a great episode, but it's not as good as Part 1. I think that Hegemony Part 2 has the potential to be better than Part 1. And like, if they can stick that landing, it's going to be a really classic two-part Star Trek story.
For sure, for sure.
Do you have a theory or a wish for Discovery, Section 31, Starfleet Academy, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, or Prodigy that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek, or email them to me at weeklytrek@thetricordertransmissions.com, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Chris Vanderkamp, for joining me today. Chris, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
I am still on Twitter. I have not moved my deck chair off of the Titanic yet. But I am also on Blue Sky. My handle on both is the same, Starfleet STGMGR. And
you can find this show on Twitter at WeeklyTrek, and me at Alexander T. Perry on Twitter, and at Alex T. Perry everywhere else. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to trekcore.com. Well, thank you, Chris. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.